What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Eric Cutler of the almighty Autopsy. Great to be able to have you here, man. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Thank you for giving us some brand new music to end. Really, as we approach the end of 2022, some great new brutal music for us to go out with. We got Morbidity Triumphant coming out very soon. Did you just consider this picking up where you left off after Skull Grinder, your last full-length album, or being that it's been quite a bit since we've gotten like a regular full-length Autopsy album? This was kind of like a new beginning in a way.
Well, it's probably not picking up where we left off because there was so much time in between. Everything was kind of different, our focus and, with pandemic shutting everything down. And when we started writing for this album, we didn't have any of the songs written beforehand and just let it go where it was going to go, which is pretty much what we do for everything, just let it come as it goes.
Yeah, it was a very organic process, to say the least, for the making of it.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, everybody writes songs and we all contribute and bring them to rehearsal and just go through. Once we get into kind of like rehearsing mode for the new stuff, we'll probably do like one every week. We'll rehearse once a week and do one, sometimes two new songs every week until we have all the album songs down. Then we'll start rehearsing it as a set. But yeah, kind of simple process we have.
Having so many albums out now and having such every Autopsy album counts in the catalog for me. Do you find it harder to put a set list together when you're playing live with the release of every new album?
Well, it's funny because we've been laughing about this because we've been playing a lot of old stuff. Ever since we got back together in 2010 and started playing shows again, we've been playing a lot of Severed Survival and Mental Funeral, and we'll throw a song here and there off of something else in there, a few, but we haven't really redone our set in a long time. I mean, we've reorganized a little bit. We've swapped out some older songs from older songs, but now we're starting to look at maybe doing some newer stuff, adding some newer stuff as we go and start reducing a little bit of the older stuff and doing a little bit more newer.
Yeah. Well, you do have like a lot of new fans as well, being that you guys have been around for a pretty long time, since like 86, 87, around that time. But you have like a lot of new fans who were discovering you guys in 2015 or with the release of Skull Grinder or Tourniquets from before. So have you noticed like more different generations of fans coming out to the shows as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just as soon as we started playing again in 2010, we just did 3 shows that year. We did Maryland Death Fest, Party Sand, and A Hole in the Sky. And it was amazing seeing the age differences in the audience, from teenagers to like we were when we started to, old men like we feel now, gray beards and stuff. And just looking around, it was really neat seeing a lot of the younger kids out there, wearing vests with patches and really getting into the scene. So yeah, a lot of different age groups now. It's fun to see.
Yeah, the most ironic thing about death metal is that it is something that will never die. There's always new life coming into death.
That's right.
Yeah. Have you do you ever start the songwriting process with maybe like a preconceived idea lyrically or instrumentally, or is there like a lot of improvising involved within your songwriting process?
It's starts with writing riffs basically and just piecing stuff together. Lyrics are written not usually for like a specific piece of music. They're just kind of written and then tailored a little bit to pieces of music where it seems like it might fit best. But it always starts with writing some riffs and starting to piece them together a little bit and seeing what works with what. Mm-hmm. That's everybody in the band, how we all write. And then we bring it together and we once we start playing, loud with everybody involved, sometimes we make little changes, based on what we think the direction might go or might be better for the song. But always starts with writing the riffs on a guitar, though.
Do you find it maybe easier to come up with ideas when you're in the company of your bandmates, or isolation being such a great fuel for creativity, you prefer to come up with different ideas when you're more alone in your element?
Well, it's it can go both ways. So when we rehearse, once we turn up and we start going at first, we just fuck around for a while on stuff and improvise and we don't play anything that we've ever played before or a song or anything. We just start making stuff up, and sometimes we come up with some really neat jams doing that. and occasionally we've recorded them, and I've listened back on certain things, and maybe taken a little bit of something, but most of the time it's you're going to be writing in your own home, or you're going to be by yourself writing your stuff, and and everybody records their stuff. Everybody has a way to layer stuff at home and write additional parts or things, and that's where it's really fun when you're writing. For me, is when I'm on the computer and I've got the software going and I'm recording riffs and stuff on top of it, and little ideas. But that's the fun part of the creative process for me for writing.
In order to like get that inspiration, do you almost like look for it in a way? Is there like maybe a lot of elements outside of yourself that you're looking for inspiration, or is it like an energy that sort of comes from within that you apply to your sound?
It's not something you can force. So it's either you're going to have something that moment or you're not. So, and you're not always going to come up with stuff. So sometimes you're just going to noodle around for a while and put the guitar down after a bit, and you really didn't do anything. You just practiced a little bit, and then other times you're not trying to do anything, and stuff just comes, and, you just got to be ready to record it, and to save it so you can listen to it later and try to make something else with it.
Yeah, I'd imagine. And it's probably impossible to figure out when a song is finished too, right? Like that's got to be the most difficult part.
It gets easier once you start getting pieces of it together, because you can kind of see a direction, because it kind of takes its own shape and form, and you can kind of see what should go where, but once you start getting it to that point where it's near the end, it's not usually that difficult, because you already know kind of what you have in mind on what's kind of maybe verse parts or where solos are going, and bridges or transitions. So you kind of can go, okay, I just need to come up with some way to end this thing now, and it's not usually that hard when you get to that point. It's harder when you're first writing some riffs and you haven't put two riffs together just yet. You're trying to piece the first two together, and then once you get that, it kind of gets a little easier for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's like a refreshing almost here, because normally I've heard from other musicians, whether it's in a similar genre as Autopsy or not, who say like the more you move on, the harder it gets in a way.
Well, I guess it can be. Every song's different too, but yeah, for me, I mean, once I get most of it written, it's not usually that hard to get it completed.
Fair enough. Now, you've been involved in many projects outside of Autopsy as well. I mean, just going down your impressive resume to go from, acts such as Funeral to Dark Hall to Skull X to Doomed and whatnot. Has every project required like a different mind frame or a different creative process in a way, or is there a usual method behind the madness that kind of like applies to everything?
Well, it's anytime you're going to get into a room with a different set of musicians, it's going to automatically be different. So all the other projects I've done, it was easy to do what we did in that band or whatever that project was, because of the people that were a part of it and playing with it. When I get in a room with the Autopsy guys, it's always going to take that same direction of what we do, and it's going to have that feel to it no matter what. We can't avoid that. And it's kind of the same if I'm doing something else, or one of Chris's other projects he's doing, or whatever. It's just when you're playing with different people, you're going to have different sounds and results and songs and ideas and everything. It's all going to be different.
100%. And I know we talked about it, how it always starts off with a riff, but I've always said that death metal really was in a way like the thinking man's music in a way, because when you take bands like Fear Factory that would sing about artificial intelligence, or Amon Amarth that sings about mythology, or Obscura that sings about space and time, it always seems like that there is a lot of thought that goes into it, even if you are writing the most brutal lyrics that are out there. But for you, has there ever been a time in the Autopsy camp, or even any other project, where maybe a lyrical idea can maybe help dictate the formation of a song?
Not for me, but mostly because I always write all the music. When I write lyrics, I'm the same way Chris does. It's not usually set for something. You write some lyrics and you write pieces of music, and then at some point you put them together. That's how we've always done it. So I really can't say I have something lyrically like that would really dictate what's going to happen music wise. It's usually maybe the other way around. How does a song sound? What's how dark is it? What's it doing? Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it, what's going on in the song that might make me want to sing about something, or have vocals about a certain, theme, but it'd probably be the other way around.
Yeah. Do you feel, kind of like a complex question, but like, do you feel that maybe an album can evolve over time as you evolve as an artist? I've always said art is life in a way. Or do you prefer if every album is more or less like a snapshot of who you are at that particular time?
Well, I don't know how much something can evolve that's done, and maybe it can evolve in perception, but it's all these records, everything that we do like that, it is kind of a snapshot of what represents what we're doing at that time, what we sound like at that time, and I think that's same for every band and every record. When you listen to bands that have put out many albums, listen to how the sound has changed, the songwriting, how it changes, and pick any band like Slayer, from how they sounded in the early days until towards the end, what their record sounded like was a bit different.
Yeah.
And that's evolving. The band's going to evolve and not want to play the same stuff all the time. It's we went and seen Iron Maiden last night, and it was a great show, and we were talking about this, about Iron Maiden wants to always be a band that's evolving in their sound. They don't want to sound like Killers and Number of the Beast and Power Slave and Somewhere in Time. They don't want to sound like that all the time. They want to do something different, and most bands are that way too. And we probably aren't that way. We probably just still just do what we do, and we're not looking to make something like better than the last album. This one's got to be better. Of course we want to make a good album, but it's the formula is going to be the same. We're just going to write with what we write, and it's going to evolve in its own natural way, I guess, because it's going to sound different. We don't sound like we're writing songs from Mental Funeral today, and it's not going to be that.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't in that regard. If you stick with a certain sound, people criticize you for being repetitive. If you experiment, people are going to criticize you for being directionless. So it seems like you just kind of have to go through your gut feeling, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Now,
true.
I feel like there's a lot in the Autopsy camp to celebrate, because there's a lot of anniversaries that I feel like we need to talk about. Starting with first one, Acts of the Unspeakable, which is now 30 years old this year. What was the sort of mindset going into Acts of the Unspeakable, and how did that at all like dictate what we would hear off of like albums such as Shit Fun or Macabre Funeral or Macabre Eternal? Sorry.
Well, it's before we did Acts of the Unspeakable, we went to Europe, and we went to this like a museum of like torture devices and stuff in Amsterdam, and it was just really messed up and dark, and the themes we seen, it was incredible, place, and it kind of spawned the idea for the inside of Acts of the Unspeakable for that artwork. We'd mentioned a few of the themes, to the artist Kent Matthew that we'd seen, and just kind of described a widespread scene of just bad stuff, and the music was kind of in the same vein, just raw, dirty, sounding stuff that, we weren't trying to polish anything, and just make something that sounded heavy that we liked. But,
and that's incredible that you mentioned that. I had no idea that that's what you were looking at before the making of Acts of the Unspeakable. But when I listened to that album, it does have that like torturous imagery behind it. You know what I mean? Even if you're just looking at the devices, it has that sort of soundtrack to it in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And being that last year was 30 years of Mental Funeral, were you taking did you see any outside sources of inspiration for that as well? Because I feel like that is like, that's a very deep meaning between Mental Funeral, like that has like a very interesting title in a way.
Yeah. So you're asking about the time of when we did the album?
Yeah. Or what the sources of inspiration was for that. Yeah.
We were watching a lot of horror movies back then, and reading books too. What you could get back in those days. Wasn't a whole lot of authors, but it was a lot of like horror movies we were watching, and just kind of wanted to have a sound that would be, a music version of a horror movie. It's kind of what we were wanting to do, something that just sounded, dirty and, again, not polished. And, when we first started out, we were we used to think about, let's just write some messed up stuff and see how many people are offended and hate it, and we were pretty successful in that for quite a while.
Well, you know what? If people, I think when it comes to music, especially this extreme, the goal is to get people to hate it as much as love it. To quote the great Peter Steele, if it doesn't upset people, it's not rock and roll.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And next year is going to mark 10 years of the Headless Ritual, which I know that was your sophomore album in your comeback in a way. So, and I felt like that was such a great year for not just death metal, but for comeback albums, because Carcass also put out Surgical Steel at that time. So behind the Headless Ritual, were you looking at, Macabre Eternal in a way, being like, let's continue sort of in that vein in a way?
No, Macabre Eternal was a really long album, and we didn't plan on it being that long. We never even timed the songs for that album before we went in, and we just recorded all that stuff, and we seen it was that long. If we'd have timed the songs and we'd have thought about it, we'd have probably broken that up and we'd have done another record, wrote some more and done another record, and it would have been Macabre Eternal, probably part 2, but wouldn't have been called that, but that's probably what it would have been. So anything, after that, it wouldn't have been an extension of Macabre Eternal. It was a long enough theme in its own, and anything we'd want to move in a different direction.
Yeah. And with the new album, Morbidity Triumphant, like, do you feel, was there at all maybe a time where maybe the times that we were living in was maybe a source of inspiration as well for the making of this album? I think we were living in fairly gruesome times now. I don't think there's a more appropriate time for death metal than now.
No, probably not. It's pretty fitting, I guess. But a lot of the inspiration that we have, it doesn't come from, our surroundings and things like that. It comes from, being a little kid and hearing Black Sabbath for the first time, and growing up listening to awesome heavy bands, like Trouble, and wanting to play music that's got a heaviness to it. That's where kind of the inspiration, comes for to play this type of music. The lyrical ideas, are different. It's, similar. It comes from wanting to have some, write about something sick, and that's, when we were teenagers, that's all we think about, as song wise, and, we still do. We still try to look for different things to write the songs about lyrically, so it's not the same, chop off your head lyrics, for every song, but our inspiration comes mainly from just wanting to, having fun doing this and wanting to write heavy music and music that we don't hear anybody else playing. That's kind of our inspiration.
Definitely. And one more anniversary I wanted to address. It's outside of Autopsy, but this, and I might be kind of picking here, I was surfing on the Metal Archives, but the Doomed demo. This is 30 years of that. And I felt like Doomed was not talked about a lot, and I find myself kind of searching for this demo everywhere, kind of like going into the archives. So I'll just ask you right now, is there any way we could get our hands on the Doomed demo? Because I would really like to hear what that was like.
Ooh, well, there was 2 records that were done. I don't have the demo myself, but there was 2 records. I don't know if you've ever seen the records, the 2 albums that were done.
I haven't got my hands on them yet.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've got one of them. Maybe I might have both, like extra copies. If you want, I'll hook you up.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
What was the formation of Doomed like? Because I know that there were, like, all the other members were kind of involved in other projects as well. Was that almost kind of like an underground supergroup in a way?
No, it started from the singer Petri. He was a friend of ours, and he wanted to be in a band. He wanted to be in a death metal band, and we kind of just helped him out. We wrote some songs for him and formed that band and recorded it. So he had something to do, I guess. But back in those days when we were playing live, he'd come with us to shows, and he'd come out. He would sing a little bit, like do a Doom song at the end of the set. Everybody would switch like instruments and play a Doom song, and he would sing, and a couple times we let him sing like that Autopsy song, but so it's basically just doing it for him because he wanted something to do and he needed an outlet. He was a crazy bastard and he needed something to do with his time. So it wasn't meant to be anything, more than that probably.
The ultimate sign of a death metal's love is helping somebody else release their anger.
There you go.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And finally, the final question I wanted to ask about Autopsy is, being that you guys started at the time when death metal was really getting its foot in the door, along the same times as the Cannibal Corpses and Morbid Angels and Deicides, but you guys started in Oakland, California, right? Like kind of like near the Bay Area in a way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. So what was the kind of like, because I always hear stories of, to me, it's either coming from New York, the home of suffocation and immolation and whatnot, or it's coming from Tampa, Florida. But coming from like the Bay Area, Oakland, like, the home of the thrash movement and stuff like that, what was the sort of scene for death metal like in the early days of Autopsy in that region?
Around here in those days, it wasn't very good for death metal because it was more a thrash metal scene in the Bay Area. So, and we loved that too. We were going to the shows and stuff too. You could go see Slayer and Exodus, Ruthie's, here in Berkeley, and you could see a lot of killer thrash metal shows. But death metal wasn't really a big thing yet at all. It was, when we first started playing shows, there wasn't big crowds coming in, and it's probably our friends and girlfriends, and that was probably it. But so it took a while to develop into something like it is now. But back then it wasn't big at all. It was pretty small. It was thrash dominated, the scene around here.
Yeah, there's a great underground band, I believe they're still signed to Prosthetic, called Wolf King, that's out from your area, that is absolutely killer. Like, it almost seems like that Bay Area really has like a great thriving underground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of bands here. I mean, just the rehearsal place we're at, it's a gigantic place with rehearsal rooms, and it's huge and it's full, and there's I don't even know how many bands are in there, but it's a lot of local bands, and most of them are metal.
Yeah.
But so I don't even know who most of the local bands are, nowadays. I know the ones that, are friends of mine, in bands, but, Mortuous and Necrot and whatnot. But
Necrot. Yeah, I forgot that they're from there. Shout out to those
guys.
Every time they play a show in New York City, and I have to do an interview at their show, they're always pulling up at the same time as I'm walking to the venue. It's like the funniest thing. It's like the joke of the New York shows with them.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
And there was no crossover though between the thrash fans and the death metal fans. It seemed like it almost seemed like when it comes to like crossover fan bases, it almost seems like thrash and death metal were almost like a match made in heaven, especially given with the bands like Sepultura and whatnot.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of crossover. I think more people that like death metal like thrash metal than thrash metal liking death metal. So I think most fans that listen to death metal listen to thrash too, but it didn't seem like people that like thrash mainly, they weren't really big death metal fans. But yeah, it does, you think about it, I hate terms for music, this is that, this is thrash, and this is death, and this is whatever, but there's a reason for that, and people are going to like what they like, but now it's different. Everybody likes a wider variety of themes, because I grew up listening to all kinds of different music. I didn't just listen to, Black Sabbath, I listened to, Frank Zappa and, Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and, The Who and Miles Davis and B.B. King and, Coltrane, all kinds of different music. I never limited myself to just one thing, but there was a brief period of time when I was a teenager where I just wanted to listen to heavy oriented music. But I still like thrash, but it is different now. It's more widespread. I think more people like different themes. Yeah. So it wasn't like that in the old days here.
You're not going to find one person, and I don't care what the comments on this video are going to say. Nobody had their first album being Tomb of the Mutilated or Beneath the Remains or Follow the Reaper or The Stench of Redemption. That was nobody's first album. You got into it either, my generation got into it through emo or nu metal. Some people got into it through Black Sabbath, like you said. Like, it seemed like death metal music, what I've always found so fascinating about death metal is that nobody in that scene started off with it, and hearing their pathway and gateways into it is always so unique.
Yeah, it is. It's not something that most people are going to get into right away. It's my son, he's about to turn 16, and he just recently started playing guitar and listening to metal. And a year ago, you couldn't make him listen to anything death metal. He wouldn't like it. Now he's playing guitar and he loves it. So it took him some time to get to that point to where he could. where he could like it. I had to start him slow with some stuff, and some more, easier metal, on the ears, that somebody hasn't heard this stuff yet. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
A lot of people's gateway drugs into death metal. It's sort of simmering right now, but the mold's about to break. A lot of people are going to get into the old death metal bands with bands nowadays like Lorna Shore or Shadow of Intent, like a lot of the deathcore stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yep. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for such an awesome conversation. Thanks for taking me down the Autopsy memory lane and really exploring the whole catalog. Just with the release of this new album, is there anything else that you would like to promote in terms of tours or other new music? You guys are on a roll and are very prolific. So,
well, we've got, with the thank you for that. We've got the new album coming out this Friday, a couple days, and there's 2 videos that's out for it too. There's a lyric video, and then there's like a horror video, and I don't know if you've seen those, but I would say go check those out because they both are really cool and really heavy. The horror one is really graphic, like a horror movie, so it's very cool. But so we've got a show in Chicago next month. We've only got a couple shows booked next year right now. I think Seattle and Stonehenge Fest, and probably start working on another album again. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. But main thing, new album's out this Friday.
Oh, hell yeah. And we just please come back to New York. The Suffocation and Immolation family and the Malignancy family all want to see you guys here.
Yeah, we love all those guys. So we want to come back to, hopefully work something out soon.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Eric of the Almighty Autopsy. Be sure to check out Morbidly Triumphant out this Friday. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.
Yes.